Good morning. When Lois asked me if I would be interested in preaching this week, since one of the lessons is on St. Stephen, who was the first deacon, I realized I had never thought much about Stephen. Stephen, notably so, was one of the 7, the first deacons, male only, to have hands laid on them by the apostles. Like today in the church, they were examined and were determined to be respectful and spirit-filled. They were tasked with distributing food and clothing, primarily for the widows in the Christian community who had no family to care for them. The story of Stephen, as told in today's reading, needs a bit of unpacking. While Stephen functioned, as did the other deacons, in caring for the widows, he was also singled out for his prophetic deeds. He apparently had a special gift for preaching and speaking truth to power, which is what eventually got him into so much trouble. I can't go into all the details here, but because of his preaching, the establishment saw him as a threat. There were false witnesses, and his preaching is linked to Jesus. He is arrested, found to be a blasphemer, and much like Jesus, tried, found guilty, and taken out of the city to be killed. Reminiscent of Jesus, as Stephen is being stoned, he looks up to heaven and offers a prayer of forgiveness for his accusers. Stephen's death also has a great impact on the early church. His death is pivotal and marks a major transition. This great persecution widens the division between the temple authorities and the followers of Jesus, who are then scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. They are expelled from Jerusalem, except for the apostles, who remain to continue to authenticate the gospel as it spreads beyond Jerusalem. Stephen, eventually, is recognized as the first martyr and is made a saint in the church. You can read the whole story in detail, starting in Acts 6 through 8. Knowing the whole story, I think, helps for us to see how St. Stephen could be seen as a saint for all times. The story of Stephen also introduces us to Saul, who stands by, watching the coats, as Stephen is stoned. And we also might ask ourselves, who might we identify with in this story? Stephen, or Saul, or the mob? Today, would we speak truth to power, or would we stand by, watching the coats? What are the challenges facing us today, especially during this pandemic? We struggle with difficult questions. Whose orders or plans do we follow to keep ourselves and others safe from the coronavirus? Do we need to wear a mask or distance ourselves? And from whom? Do we reopen businesses Which ones? And how? Over 20 million people have applied for unemployment, or at least tried to. As of this week, only 33% have received relief checks, and for varying amounts. We are being asked to decide between the economy and our health. If the economy determines the numbers in food lines around the country and those who die, which side are we on? A number of years ago, I had the privilege of going to Navajo land to help them with their diaconal program. I traveled around the diocese to various churches, mostly very small congregations. It broadened my understanding of our Native Americans, and especially of their environmentally focused spirituality. And then this week, a former CDSP student of mine, who is now a priest in the Diocese of Navajo Land, posted on Facebook how he is ministering to his congregation and their struggles between following medical guidelines, keeping safe, being unemployed, and feeding their families. He is both pastor to them and delivering food as he tries not to contract the virus. I asked him, how can I help? Father Michael's story is common and underlines the discrepancies between rich and poor, black, brown, and white, along with a number of other discriminating issues that have long existed here in the United States. Who do we identify with? Stephen or Saul? The question is always, how do we follow Jesus' teachings as we interact with one another? How do we love our neighbor as ourselves, especially when they see them responding to this pandemic in ways that we don't agree with? I watch much too much TV news. I worry about the disparity in our country, especially when people bear arms, wave flags, and demand that governors reopen our states in ways that I think are unsafe for the majority. I also worry that they too need to feed their families and stay well. While today's lesson in Acts is a story of martyrdom, it is also a story that poses questions for all of us, especially as we struggle to be Christian in a diverse, divided society living during a pandemic. For myself, as a deacon in the church, my job is not martyrdom, but to find ways to help all of us live our diaconal call, the one we pledged at our baptism, to strive for justice and peace among all people, and respect the dignity of all. To which we all answered, I will, with God's help. As a Christian, deacon, and elderly person, I stay home. I am frustrated with not being able to do something to help. And I also, like many of you, know that I need to not become a part of the larger problem. Many of us are finding ways to help while staying at home, purchasing and delivering food for those who are compromised and sick, making masks and PPE for medical and other frontline workers, sending money to the Solano Food Bank, Episcopal Impact Fund, as well as other organizations. Also important, we pray. We pray for all those, not only in these United States, but around the world, who are suffering in these pandemic times. We can pray for therapies to treat this virus and for a vaccination. We can pray for ourselves as we seek to do God's will, following Jesus' example. John Philip Newell, a poet and scholar, believes in the transformative power of Celtic Christian spirituality to support us in our era. The ancient Celts made great use of liminal times and places to integrate the paired opposites of which the world seems to be made. He writes, "Do we know that within each one of us is the unspeakably beautiful beat of the sacred? Do we know that we can honor that sacredness in one another and in everything that has being? And do we know that this combination, growing in awareness that we are bearers of presence, along with a faithful commitment to honor that presence in one another and in the earth, that this holds the key to transformation in our world? I think this is what we are missing in our inability to come together to worship and share the Eucharist. I also think that being present to one another and remembering that God is present in each of us will help us get through this liminal and hopefully transformative time together.